Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Wow, What Number Podcast is this? Do you believe we're in a new year, 2021? It sounds like Space Odyssey to me, 2021. Something funny happened the other day. Somebody who I was working with referred to something that had happened in the 1980s. And as though who could remember that far back? Like you'd get a medal or something. And I had this moment like, cheeky monkey. I have clear memories of the 1980s, which cannot be said for all of my friends. Anyway, the 80s were great. And so is this year going to be great. We're going to make it even better than last year. And this material today is going to be part of helping you clear that path that you're on to getting your lives, but also the spaces you conduct those lives in, just the way you want them to be. So what do we want to start with? So today we're going to work in snippets, all right, from this book. It was written by Dr. Spencer Johnson. He has a whole series that are New York Times bestsellers, but for good reasons, all right? It's clear and elegant in the message that it offers all of us. And we all, myself included, have things to learn from this little book. The title of it is Yes or No, The Guide to Better Decisions. And it's not a formula book. It's a discovery book. The thing I love about it is it's an apply it to your own life book. All right. You have your unique formula for what has happened in your life and also the path out of it. And I believe that firmly. After more than 35 years as a social worker, 19 and a half of them specializing in nothing but hoarding disorder. It was published by HarperCollins in the original book in 1992. And somebody's got a dog. As is typical with Dr. Johnson and the messaging that he wants to offer, he's done it again in the form of a story. So this podcast topic I've discovered in preparing it has to be covered in multiple segments over numerous weekly segments, all right? And it's going to include ideas, and materials from a few experts because Dr. David Burns also has really good information that I want to make sure I've let you know about, and I've given you enough information about it. It's from the 10 Days to Self-Esteem workbook. And there are one or two others that kind of create a patchwork of a supportive mindset and then action formula for you to use, but always to apply it to your own values, your own beliefs, and your own reality. So today I'm going to largely do reading from the segments of the book. And if you can, I strongly recommend that you get a copy of his book. It's not expensive. I got it on Amazon, hard copy for $8. You can also go to used books like Alibris Books or ABC Books and probably get it even cheaper in paperback, or it's probably an audiobook for those people who live with any degree of ADD or ADHD, or just find that they enjoy audiobooks better. All right. I get nothing out of that, but it's a good little resource book that you can continue to go back to when you're overwhelmed and you're struggling, you feel a little off course. In fact, Dr. Johnson actually wrote this book originally for himself, to help him feel less stressed and be more effective in his decision making. Okay, so my hope for you today is that in a little way, with the material that we cover, somehow that will lighten the pressure you feel and the tyranny of perfectionism. All right, particularly when it comes to making the decisions that you need to make. This book specifically talks about decision making, obviously from the title, but it does it so simply that it's easy. It's easy to apply to whatever issues are facing you down. All right. So the fact is that we can never have all of the information that would make us comfortable, that myself included. When I have decisions to make, I also have to find a cutoff point of, I can't possibly know that far out what the what ifs would be. All right. And so unless I want to stay stuck in now, which doesn't stay now, it very quickly becomes then, our past. So stuck in the past, behind the curve of what I need to do to kind of stay moving forward in my life, there's a cutoff point I have to reach with myself, a moment of peace where I can go, that's the best you can do at this point, Elaine, with what you know and what others, if it's a particularly important decision that I'm making, what others who maybe have more experience or are more informed, what they can add to your pot of considerations. But in the end, I have to live with the decision. So I need to make it based on what I have. All right. So the one thing too that this book does, I hope it helps you do it as well, is helps you confront the fact that we can't make an ideal decision. What we can make is the best we can do. So in pursuit of that ideal decision, our thoughts, our fears, our beliefs, the voices on the committee, all right, undermine many people. So let's get started. There once was a bright young man who was looking for a way to make good decisions, to have more success and less stress in his life. Although he didn't make many really poor decisions, when he did, they created real problems for him at work and occasionally upheavals in his private life. Certainly, it caused upheavals in his internal life with himself. All right. He felt his poor decisions were costing him way too much, and he sensed that there just had to be a better way. So he set out for a nearby mountain one day in the early morning light to join a group of business people who were on the hike, a renowned weekend experience led by a guide, an extraordinary businessman and hiker who guided people through the mountains and at the same time through their decisions. The young man had heard that many people had discovered a reliable system for decision making and had returned from these weekends actually able to make better decisions. But how had they learned to use it so well and in such a short time? Seemed unlikely to him, but he was willing to try. Later, as the young man hiked along the trail at the foot of the mountain, he took off his light jacket and he tied it around his waist. He was sweating now, not from the morning sunshine, but because he felt anxious about taking on this learning experience. He knew that he'd made himself late because of decisions he'd made that day, one of which was don't bring the map with you. And he was a little bit lost, as we often are when we're trying to decide which way to go. All right. Many of us, most of us, practically all of us could do better and feel better about the decisions we make if we only had a map. Soon after he left home, though, he realized that he'd forgotten the directions to the camp. Now, standing there lost and sweating with anxiety, he wished he'd gone back for them. Have you ever been in that situation where you make a decision, you're full out of the gate, and then you go, whoops, wow, in very short order, I wish I'd only done something else instead. But he thought at the time he made that decision, he probably that might be his better decision, his best decision, because finding the map would make him a little late. So he hadn't taken the time. Now, very late, he proceeded in the same direction, but at a much faster pace. He consoled himself that he was not the only person who needed to make better decisions. He'd been part of several business groups whose decisions were at best, it turned out to be just mediocre. The results of poor decisions were evident everywhere. People made decisions. You make those decisions, I make those decisions. In corporations, in small businesses, in schools, in government agencies, and way too often in people's personal lives. It was as though people made no connection between their choices, our choices, and the consequences. People just tell themselves, it's fate, or that's just the way it is, or it's just the way it turned out. Not necessarily so. The young man wondered why so many smart people so often made really dumb decisions. He began to criticize himself. He didn't always know how to work as a decisive member of a group or team either. He knew sometimes he was really indecisive. He just didn't want to make mistakes. Then he realized that he, like most people, had never been taught how to make decisions. At that moment, he stepped on a dry twig and a sharp sound snapped him back into his awareness of his surroundings. As he stopped and looked around, he saw another man. For a moment, the two of them kind of eyeballed each other rather cautiously, and the young man noticed that this older man's tanned face seemed to radiate clarity. He wondered whether this tall, gray-haired, fit-looking gentleman could be the hike's primary guide. For some reason, the young man felt safer in the stranger's presence. "I'm looking for the hike," he said. The older man responded, "I'm your guide." "You're headed in the wrong direction, though." Then he turned and the young man followed him. The guide looked back over his shoulder and said, "You might do well to look at the decisions that made you late today." The man was embarrassed and said nothing, but he started to reconsider his decisions that morning, to see what the path to this uncomfortable situation was that he was in. Later, the guide asked, "Why did you come on the hike?" And the young man answered, "I want to learn how to make best decisions." As he said it, he could feel that familiar pressure of having to figure out what was best. He knew that this sometimes made him indecisive, often, in fact, because he didn't know what was good enough. As he walked along, the guide said, "Have you ever considered that perhaps you do not always need to make best decisions? For things to get better, we only need to make better decisions. Perhaps like the rest of us, you'll find that if you just keep making better decisions, eventually you'll do very, very well." The man felt a sense of relief. "May I ask you what you mean by better decisions?" Probably the subtext in his mind is also, what is a better decision? How can you settle for a better decision when really you've got this compelling need for the right decision, the best decision? The guide offered, "A better decision is one that makes us feel better about how we make it, and also that yields us better results." By a better decision, the guide said, I mean a better decision than we would have made if we'd not asked ourselves a couple of valuable questions. Perhaps you at times, like many other people, feel that you've been indecisive or that you've made half decisions. One you feel may not be quite good enough. Many of us that you'll meet on this hike overcame that feeling. We did it by using a reliable system of doing two things: using our heads and consulting our hearts to arrive at a better decision. Part of this system consists of asking yourself two valuable questions, the answer to which is only yes or no. The young man immediately asked, "What are the two questions?" "Before we get to the questions, shall we start our journey at the beginning?" the guide asked. When the young man agreed, the guide asked, "As you look ahead to making better decisions, do you know what you need to do first?" "I'm not sure," the young man said. "If you don't know what to do," the guide asked, "do you know what not to do?" Usually the young man was so busy doing many, many, many things, he didn't even think about what not to do. Suddenly the guide stopped in his tracks and the young man stopped next to him. The guide said, "You must simply stop doing whatever you're doing." Then the guide pulled out a folded piece of paper from his wallet and showed him a part of it. After the young man read it, he thought about it and then took out a small red journal from his backpack and wrote down the following message. "I offer this to you as a beginning principle to making better decisions. To make a better decision, I must first stop proceeding with a poor decision." The guide said, if you stop a poor decision and create a void, you now have the possibility to fill it with something better. The young man said, "But I'm afraid that if I give up what I have, I won't find anything better, period." "We're all afraid of that," the guide said. "It takes courage to let go of what's familiar and comfortable. But in reality, it's actually a safer and more reliable way to get better results. When what's not working for you is finally out of your way, you're then free to find something better. And you usually do this better thing rather quickly." The young man thought for a moment and then asked, "Why do we keep doing what we know doesn't work?" "Because," the guide said, "although it's often dangerous and counterproductive, we feel safer if we do not change what's familiar. Eventually, though, the ineffective but familiar becomes accepted in the life decisions people make." "Can you give me an example?" the young man said. "I prefer to have my own good map." I remember reading Winston Churchill's comment that personally, I'm always ready to learn, although I often do not like being taught. So for any of you who have that resistance in you to being told what to do or someone setting expectations for you, maybe you've come from a family background, although it might have been very positive in many ways. You were actually helicoptered parented so that the parents were either always in a loving way being overprotective and you never got to make mistakes and bump your head because they always pushed you on a path to excellence or better or best or the right way. Or maybe you got punished and ridiculed. Maybe you had parents who made poor decisions and you haven't had that training, that skill set taught to you, okay? There are many ways to end up afraid and not liking being taught. Just remember this, though. This isn't from the book. That if you are reactive, if you are resistant to anyone offering you ideas, and it feels like you're being told what to do or expected, or there are rules and you rebel against those, even privately, internally, they're still in control. All right? You're still giving them control. The past is controlling you. Those people that you resisted are still driving the bus. Okay, back to the book. The guide smiled too. It's a challenge for us to find a better way on our own, but any of us can do it by using the yes-no system. How do I know it will work for me? The young man asked. Why don't you just use it and see for yourself, said the guide. Ask yourself this question. What right now in this moment is a problem for me? Could be a situation at work, or it could be in your own life. And what do I wish would improve? My initial decision, okay, is maybe right now you could jot down a few notes yourself, folks, about what is the problem for you right now? And what do you wish would improve? My initial decision is to, what's your initial take on how to respond to that? Next question, what am I actually going to do about it? If you're not sure, maybe for now, I'm actually going to do nothing. I will do something, but I'm not sure of exactly what or when. Is that a yes or a no? Perhaps I'll do the following. What are three small, simple things that you think might yield you an initial idea on how to address that thing that is a problem for you right now? Upon reflection, my better decision might be to wait, stop following the path that hasn't worked in the past, because if nothing changes, nothing changes, and listen to the rest of the information Dr. Spencer Johnson offers and see if that yields other ideas. So the yes-no system is actually a two-part journey to arrive at better decisions. To get there, we look at both sides of a decision by asking ourselves two simple questions. The first is a practical question, and the second is a private one. And then we make our decision. We do what the better decision dictates. How does the system work? We make a decision, an initial decision in our normal way. Then we ask ourselves a head question and a heart question. Next, we listen to ourselves. Now, this is important. Next, after we ask ourselves that, what is the problem for me? What do I wish would change? That's the head and heart part. Next, we listen to ourselves and to others who have experience. Do they dictate what we do? No, they don't. But they add to our repertoire of options about what experienced people might offer us to consider. And we make a better decision. And then we act on it. We test it. We actually get out of that state of being immobilized and we try it out. And this really works. Okay, this really works, the young man asked. It works because you avoid indecision, which is getting you nowhere, and you avoid half decisions based on half truths. The combination of your mind, your brain, and your heart is your best vehicle, your best method to making decisions in Conquer the Clutter. I call them, I thought I invented it, to make decisions that you can live with Does that sound like every one of them is ideal? No. No, you can learn more later and make a path correction, but at least you're on a better path if you are combining what your head tells you and what your heart tells you. And you can experience it in any combination. Sometimes you feel it so intensely. You know you need a better decision. You're not satisfied, or this other normal way of doing it hasn't worked for you. And so you feel it so intensely. That's the driving factor. So you come up with options. Generally, those are things that you've tried in the past. How well did they work? Then you go to your brain and you ask yourself more strategic questions, but you don't overthink it, okay? So I use both parts of a reliable system to consistently make better decisions with a cool head and a warm heart, the guide said. I use my head by asking myself that practical question, and then I consult my heart by asking myself a private question that is specific to me about the situation. Then after I listen to myself and others who have experience, I actually do make a better decision, and then I act on it. I test it. The key is to use a reliable system, the guide noted, because the system consistently used yields better results, even if mistakes are sometimes made. A mistake, now write this one down, folks. A mistake is never a flaw in the person, but in the system he or she is using. The yes-no system, the guide continued, helps people to look at what they say yes to and what they say no to. Using it, most people make better decisions because using that system that is true to what you know here and what you feel and believe here in balance, you actually make fewer mistakes. And you get better results as a consequence. But the key is always to use both questions. The young man asked, okay, so exactly how do I use it? You can use it in various ways. After making an initial decision, you can course correct by making a better decision, by using your head or consulting your heart or consulting others who have more experience or more knowledge. And you can do it in any order you like. There are 3 ideas embedded in the combination of the head and heart questions. All right. And how much time does this take? Asked the young man. That depends on how important the decision is to you and how clear you are, that so much so that you can focus on one part of the question, which may help you to make a better decision in just a few minutes. So the focus you develop as well helps. And that can be made better by not being haunted by indecision based on uncertainty. What's the worst that could happen? Or you can spend more time asking all 3 parts of both questions and make it an even better decision. But the more often you ask the head question and the heart question together, the faster and easier it becomes. The guide cautioned to be patient with yourself in the beginning. Okay, I phrase that as in be gentle with yourself. Gentle does not mean putting your feet up and avoiding making the decisions that you know are in your best interest, though. Okay, you may think that half of the system, it just sounds too familiar and maybe too easy. But when you go back and forth across that, matching what your brain tells you with what your heart tells you is true for you, and you go back and forth there, you accomplish a few things. The first thing, and I love this about what he said, is you will learn more about yourself, because you are the key to all of this. All right? You will experience both halves of yourself, and you'll find what you're looking for, because in this system, it gives you a way. There may be other ways, but that gives you a good, simple, easy to use way to honor yourself, to integrate yourself in whatever decision you're looking to make. The guide added, just remember though, use both parts of the system. One won't work without the other. Okay? So when I ask myself this, I start first question I ask myself, remember there were 3 questions to each part, the head part and the heart part. What is the real need? The young man said to one of the fellow travelers, and the guide told me that there are 2 questions that I can ask myself to help me make a better decision. But what are those 2 questions? This new companion said, you can use your head by asking the first question. Write this down. Am I meeting the real need? Second question. Am I informing myself of options? How do we do that? Remember, the first guide said, consult others who have more experience, know more about it, and bring that into what you now have to consider as an option. Third question, am I thinking it through? His companion said, ask yourself now, are you using your head? And the young man answered rather quickly, sort of. His companion questioned, okay, but how does sort of serve you? Would it help you more if you could answer either yes or no? Because sort of or maybe is really a non-answer. All right. His companion knew the young man was uncertain and a little defensive. Look closer at the 3 ideas embedded in the first question. First, meeting the real need. Second, informing yourself of options. And then thinking it through. Start with the first. Are you meeting the real need with respect to this problem you would like to change? The young man relaxed. Perhaps it would help him to think more clearly if he just replied either yes or no. He knew to what he knew was the real need for his decision, or a no if after a little thinking, a little consideration, he honestly didn't know. Fine, said his companion. As soon as you answer no to a question, now you can pay more attention to it. Okay, no means pay more attention to those 3 questions. Is it the real need? Have you considered what others more experienced than yourself might offer you in the way of options? And then what? And then you can arrive at a better decision. The young man asked, what do I need to pay more attention to? If you answer no to the final part, the first part, when you need to pay more attention to where you're going, all right, most of it will say usually, because we end up being stuck because we don't know what we need. So we go off in the wrong direction. If we just stopped at that point, remember right in the beginning? If we just stopped at that point and we drill down on what do I really need, then I can avoid wasting time going down a path that isn't the path I need to be on. But how do you know what the real need is? He asked his companion. You can begin by asking, is this something I merely want? Or is it what I really need? What's the difference? The young man asked his companion. His companion replied, a want is a wish. A need is a necessity. A want is just an attractive distraction which we may pursue, but later we find unfulfilling. Remember the metaphor I put in Conquer the Clutter about being a man at sea in a boat with no water? The water is his need, and he's surrounded by water. But that second question, asking more of others who know more, in having done that, gathering that information about salt water will kill you. It's water, but it's the wrong thing. When we apply that, so what would your decision be? Hang on would be your decision. Don't be drinking the salt water. When we're talking about clutter, it could be something as simple as the temptation to acquire because something seems so good. All right. Is that a wish? Is that a want? Or is it a need? You can answer that by where it's going to lead you. Okay. Because no matter the reason, it takes so much. And this can even be applied not necessarily to people who acquire a great deal, but maybe they let things build up just for now. They don't stay ahead of things. And before you know it, they're overwhelmed by clutter, by paper, and da-da-da-da. Okay, that just for now is not the better path. Because why would you do that? Because you don't have enough emotional energy or mental energy to deal with it right now. Better information might tell you that giving yourself what you need in the moment, a small rest with a date to come back to it, a deadline to deal with it, day by day, maybe half day by half day, so that you can stay on top of it rather than leaving it and giving yourself a lot of rest, which then turns out to be the tyrant of reminder of what I have yet to do, and it's building up around me. And now I have to put blinders on. This information is hugely appropriate to sorting and to hoarding, okay? A want is just an attractive distraction, which we may pursue, but later will find unfulfilling because that distraction, that want, inherently in hoarding is the wrong thing to do. What, people? To meet the need. That's why you need so much of it. It's the wrong thing. There will never be enough bright and shiny, lovely things. There will never be enough mementos and things to hold on to from relationships or people we've lost or times in our lives. It doesn't bring those back. That's why we need so much of it. It's the wrong thing. We're never going to get fulfilled by that. Even if we finally get what we want, okay, it often leaves us still wanting. Keeping all of the things from a deceased parent or a deceased relationship or a time in your life that was traumatic, keeping all of the things that remind you of what you long for. All of those things, don't they still leave you wanting? So is the answer so much of what is a reminder or what is undone? Is that the answer? Or is it getting the help you need with the grief you feel or the trauma you have experienced, or undoing the voices from the committee in your head. That's what you need to set yourself free and have the life you're meant to have. And a need, however basic, remember this, getting the need, that need, no matter how tiny or how big, is always nurturing. A need is what the situation requires. The trouble with most people, though, is that they forget to use the basic principles that work. They believe if they feel confounded, all right, overwhelmed is another word for confounded. It has to be more complicated. Keep it simple, please, people. The truth is always simple. If it takes a long time to kind of gather up and line up things, don't overthink it. What is the simple truth about what your needs are? Truly successful people at whatever endeavor they undertake, including the people who have gone before you regarding hoarding or clutter, they undertake first and foremost the pursuit of what they need. The key is focusing on the real need. Focusing means seeing a vision. That's why I developed that scaling process. That is your visioning board. The 1, 2, 3s, can't imagine life without it. I love them. If something's got to go, it's not going to be that. The 7, 8, 9, 10s, in a perfect world, it'd be nice, but no, something's got to go. Clearly, I know when I respect the brain part of my decision and the heart part of my decision, I know I don't have the same attachment or importance or meaning for those things at the 7, 8, 9, 10. I know it. It's the 4, 5, 6s that require a little more work, okay? So focusing is taking the best example of the 1, 2, 3, that thing you can't imagine life without, taking the best example of the 7, something's got to go. It's going to be something from that pile. And then running it over the 4, 5, 6s. If it's closer to the 1, 2, 3s, then it's a 4. Set it aside for now. You don't have to decide about that. Chances are all or most of those 4s are going to be possible to keep, to house, to find a permanent place for. Usually, not always, but usually that's what happens. But if it's closer to the 7, then it's a 6. If you can, take those things as you find them and put them with the 7, 8, 9, 10s. Consideration of what will go to free up the space. And now what have you accomplished? You've made a better decision by a country mile, because now all you have to decide about are the 5s. Okay, you've just really simply, by honoring yourself, combining the brain part of your decision and the heart part of your decision. He's talking about it in this format. I developed it. I did. The scaling process that also honors both sides of that decision-making process. And the better decision yields you a much smaller 1/10 of what you had to decide before. Okay? Try it. Go back to the book and try it. Go back to Conquer the Clutter. Try the scaling process. Remember what he said here, though. Focus. Focusing means seeing a vision of not only the results you really need, but focusing on those results so clearly. What's it going to look like when your environment is safe, when It's a happy place to be when it's not that nagging voice of, oh, we're over here. You haven't dealt with this yet. We're still here. We're still here. Okay. But dealing with it, focusing on it in such a detailed way that you can actually see yourself. You can envision achieving what you know you want and need to achieve. So, the young man said, I think I'm beginning to see that when you focus on what the real need is, by saying no to everything else, every other distraction that gets in the way, that looks enticing, okay, you get better results. You can write down in detail what those results look like that you need. You can write it down in such detail. You can do a visioning board. You can clear one area to be precisely what you want the rest of your home to look like so that you get that visual trigger so clearly, though. It has to be so clear in your mind that you don't let anything else distract you. His companion agreed. You're right. You focus by saying no to whatever doesn't help you to achieve the real need. And yes, only to what does. I'm going to repeat that. You get that vision of what you're looking for, what you want, your environment, or whatever you have a decision to make about. You get that, you taste it, you feel it, you smell it. It's so vivid in your experience using all of your senses, okay, that you now can focus on it. It's clear. And you say no to whatever doesn't help you to achieve the real need, that basic first question. And you say yes only to what does help you achieve it. How can I become so decisive? The young man asked. His companion said, the more clearly you see the results you need in the end, the easier it is to deal with whatever might happen along the way. The principle to use is when I pursue my real need, I am more decisive and I make better decisions if I recognize in myself that we all want a lot. Myself included, okay? Everybody. But we need very little. When we focus the decision down to what we actually need with respect to that problem we want to solve, that's what makes us feel really successful. And that is huge energy, okay, to making a much better decision more easily. Focus, focus, focus. Doesn't have to be 24/7. It's for that period, remember? Start at 15 minutes a day. And there's a reason that it's 15 minutes a day. The reason is it's exhausting. It takes a lot of determination, a lot of perseverance, and a lot of energy to focus for 15 minutes solidly. The young man asked, how can I tell the difference between what I want and what I need? His companion added, to see what you merely want, ask yourself this, write this down, okay? What do I wish I could do? To see what you really need, ask yourself, looking back on this, what would I like to have done? Don't get distracted by chasing the next rabbit down the hole that crosses your path. That's just something you may want to do. See what's needed and pursue the real need until you achieve it. So here's another thing to consider. When you're starting out, it isn't the mountain you want to move, okay? It's not the mountain you want to move. Don't go for the biggies. Start small. Small chunks, regular. But remember we were talking the other day about there are 2 ways to do this. There's the hummingbird method. Beat, 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 beat all over. And, it's the same amount of work, but you don't have a lot to show for it at the end of it. If you can make yourself work strategically by starting in one corner and continuing to go back to that corner and remediate whatever you need to remediate, the cumulative effect of those small 15-minute periods, you will be surprised at how well you can do this. But be patient with yourself. Patient doesn't mean give up and take a holiday. Patient means take a breath, set the timer, commit. There is nothing. If the doorbell rings, they can stand there for 15 minutes. If the phone rings, you can pick up a voicemail message. All right? Okay. See what's needed and pursue the real need until you've achieved it in small chunks, 15-minute chunks. The young man asked himself, what was the real need for his decision? If he could do only one thing, what did it need to be? There's a question right there for 15 minutes, isn't it? That's a really good, doable question. I hadn't realized that the first few times I read through on this. If you could do only one thing well per work period, what does it need to be for you? And then he asked himself, am I meeting the real need? How do you know that? Second question, am I informing myself of other options based on input from people who have more experience or who know more? And am I thinking it through? So the need is here in your heart, okay? The thinking it through is here. And the sorting out process of what you're going to try first is based on your own experience, your own wisdom, and good information from experienced people or informed people who can add to the options you have to choose from in choosing your better path. Does it guarantee it is the ideal path? No, but please give up on that, because the fact is, it takes a lot of mental work to convince yourself this is the ideal path, and it really is. All we can ever make are better decisions, okay? Meeting the real need, a summary pursuing only the real need is the very beginning. And if you keep doing that, it keeps getting better and easier, yielding better results more easily in the long run. And the bonus is you get to know yourself better. Okay, it takes a while in the beginning to take yourself through these steps. It feels very cumbersome, like, really, I'm so overwhelmed, and now this is like greasing the pan. You know, when you want the cake to come out of the pan, you know how you grease it a little and then you kind of put a little flour or whatever on it so that you're not serving the cake out of the cake pan because you couldn't get it out. This is the same thing. This is greasing the pan, folks. And the more you do that, the better you do that, every time you get better cakes. All right? It's a multi-step, it's a 3-step process. If you just grease the pan, what's going to happen? You're going to have basically a manhole cover. Because the reason that second step of a little bit of flour around the edge of the pan is so important is because that gives the batter something to kind of climb up on. Though the input from others who know more about the topic or are more experienced in life and who care about you, all right, that's the flower that you are going to climb up out of this hole of a pan you're in to better decisions. And then you think it through and you decide. You cut the cake and eat it. All right? Okay, this means both seeing a vision of a needed result, okay, in such detail that you can actually almost feel and see it having been achieved. Wants or wishes? That's the question. Wants are wishes, needs are necessities. Okay? Okay. So let's just see about the chat box here and see what we have. Okay. There's more material and we'll continue it next week. Okay, that's right. Yes or No, Guide to Better Decisions by Spencer Johnson, MD. Tyranny, you're right. The tyranny of that nagging pile that says, I'm still here. I'm still here. And your need then to close out part of what you could enjoy in your life. You put blinders on, and we do, to block out what we don't feel able to deal with. You do that. You also block out the good. That's the thing about blinders. Yes, it protects you from the reality of what's building up around you, but it also blocks out the good. I'm embarrassed to say that I read, you know, Nora, don't be embarrassed. Please don't be embarrassed. You've read it, yes, but you know what? Sometimes, like, and I said this in Conquer the Clutter, sometimes you can read the books, but you're just not available for the message. Okay, and usually that's because your head, your heart, and your mind, and your body, your life was full of a different challenge. You were on that path. You were picking up the signals and messages that were appropriate to that path. But here's the thing. You now know it exists. Go back and drill down on it. Okay? Go back and there's nothing to be ashamed of, nothing to be, it's not a fault. Okay? You needed the information that you were gathering at that time in your life. This was not the big issue. Okay? Stop, no blaming ourselves. We really do, all right? We really do every day do the honest best that we can figure out. Sometimes that's been avoidance, but there is a moment like Nora now with this book where you go, to use Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil is pretty good about hoarding. I have to say that, all right? So I don't subscribe to the law and order method of counseling, but how's it working for you? Okay, how is staying on that path with the blinders or beating yourself up when you take them off for a while and you notice, this isn't what I want, this isn't what I need. Remember, the fault, it's not the person. The fault, what's lacking is not the person. That's not where the problem is. The problem is the system you're using to deal with today's problem. Okay. Let's see. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. Oh, yeah, that is true. That is true. I would buy it from you, please. Well, I only have my one copy of Yes or No. If that's the book you're referring to, then I would go to Amazon, frankly. because you can get, or go to Alibris books, ALBRIS. You can get them secondhand as well, used, whatever. If you're talking about Conquer the Clutter that you want to buy directly from me, you can go to the website, and that's one of the reasons why we put PayPal on there. And I've got 200 books here so that it can never go out of print. Okay, that's strategic thinking. Hello, Silver. Okay. So there's a private message here. I'll come back to that one, Gwen. Okay. I'll come back to that one later, and maybe I'll figure out how to answer that next week for you. Okay. Another direct message, Alina. Can I please repeat? What can I wish I could do? Okay. Let me just repeat this. Part of the message, a few people want to have that. Yeah, here we are. So if you merely want to ask yourself what you want, what you wish, the question is, what do I wish I could do? That's about a want. To see what you really need, ask yourself, looking back on this situation, what would I like to have done? See the difference there? Okay. See if we can get through a few more here. It's sad, but absolutely not your fault. She passed away. Therapy will help. It does take time. Grief is a process. It really is a process. And you're so wise to work that process because unresolved grief is a hugely destructive emotion. All right. There are so many decisions I wish I could take back. Isn't that true for all of us, Dina? I try to forgive myself, love all there is. Here we are. I lost Dina. All there is. I try to forgive myself. I love and forgiveness. That's all there is. Forgiving ourselves is often more difficult than forgiving other people. It's true. And one of those reasons is because we expect ideal and perfection. Okay, we expect that sometimes in our worst moments, our most challenged moments, which are often times where pivotal things in our life are happening, that we had the clarity of mind, the support, the strength to do what we wish we would have done. That's true for all of us. You're not alone. Good, Gwen. Gwen says, I just ordered this book on Amazon. It will serve you well. Don't forget, you think I'm pitching books. I'm not really. Don't forget Who Moved My Cheese. All right. If you have any problem with risk management, fear of making mistakes, fear of that Who Moved My Cheese, I have to tell you, I am so grateful to the person who suggested that I read that book. All right. As I told you, I think last week, maybe it was in the hoarding support group on Monday nights. I come from an Irish background, and while my folks weren't poor, everybody before them was desperately hardworking and simple folk. Okay, just working as hard as they possibly could. And it's not like my family was privileged, but we didn't have to scrape and worry the way our previous generations. That when that goes into a cultural background, gosh, you know what? I'd be surprised if somebody who had enough money to research this didn't find it's in your DNA. Okay, it's not just in the family messages, how to survive in life, all those lessons your parents teach you, your grandparents teach you because you're so precious to them. They want nothing to ever happen to you. Guys, okay, if at times in your life you aren't covered with bruises from life, okay, get out of the box. Some stuff is going to happen. Some stuff, that's what I've learned. The only way not to kind of get feeling sometimes a little poked and prodded by life is to stay out of the box and actually keep walking the path. All right. And sometimes you find you're on the wrong path. Back up. There's always a way. Always a way. These 3 questions, okay, and the balance of the head part and the heart part, these 3 questions, and that very first bit of advice, if you really believe you're not making the decision you need to make and you don't know what to do, stop. Okay, stop doing what always hasn't worked in the past. Stop. Sit down. Figure out the best you can using those 3 questions. All right. My version of that in Conquer the Clutter and in my podcast is, what do I need? Not what is the bright and shiny thing that will distract me and for the moment make me feel better. What do I need fundamentally? Where is it? Some of that may involve Dr. Johnson's suggestion, ask other people who have more experience or who know more about the topic. Okay. And how do I get enough of it? What part is my part to act, to get enough of it to make a difference? Okay. I'm going to leave you with that thought. We're going to pick this up and finish this. We may even get to start what Dr. Burns has to offer, because there is another important question that we all need to ask ourselves when we start on a journey of self-discovery or self-improvement or backing up down a path that turned out not to be the right path. That will also serve us well. He has a lot of good work that he's done as well. And I want to bring some of those concepts to you. And then we'll move forward and apply them to hoarding more and more. Okay. You take care, everybody. Have a great week. We'll see you next week. Be good to yourself. I'll be thinking about you. Take care. I love